And yet we're given this idea that the enemy looks like they're gonna prevail. And isn't that a recurring theme in the Christian's life? You ever felt that way? My dad suddenly and tragically died in 2019, like a week after we got into the building. And probably never in my life did I sense that the enemy was prevailing more than I did in that moment. We just celebrated, 25 baptisms last week? And see, in my heart and mind, it was like my dad was going to get in those waters at some point. You know that? You hear my voice? Sometimes it feels like the enemy is prevailing, right? And have no confidence whatsoever that my dad is with the Lord. Some of you know that. Some of you feel that as a parent. You've been praying and leading your kid, and he is walking away or she is walking away from the Lord, and maybe they're still with us, but you feel like the enemy is winning. You feel like that gospel that you're preaching is just not quite powerful enough, that maybe if you could just say it better, it feels like, man, you're trying so hard. You look at our society, and it's like, are there even wheels left on it? Like, we say the wheels are falling off, but it's more like the whole thing is coming apart. And it feels worse than ever. It could be me. Some of y'all have lived longer, but it definitely can feel that way. And so the question is, what is our comfort? What is our solace? What hems us in to hope in the midst of those times when it feels like the kingdom is just losing to the enemy, when it just doesn't seem, it seems like it's tottering? Well, what's our confidence in that moment? And I want to talk about that. When God's kingdom seems undermined, when it seems under attack, when we need confidence to know that the kingdom of God is going to persevere, here's where we ought to stake our hope and stake our claim. God is sovereign. That's where we need to stake our hope. God is sovereign. And I will borrow the words from Job 42, verse 2, and therefore no purpose of his can be thwarted. He is in the heavens, and he does all that he pleases. And so I want to give you this big idea for today, and then I want to see it flesh out, give you 3 thoughts that you can take solace in today in God's sovereignty. But before that, let me get to the big idea. God's sovereignty is a great solace, comfort, to me, in that no sin or sinner can thwart God's kingdom plans, okay? Which is good news on 2 sides. One, if there's a rebellious sin or sinner sin is rebellious always. If there's a rebellious sinner that is trying to press against the Lord, here's the good news. They're going to be a stat on for God's glory in one way or another way, okay? They're either going to be a stat of God's glory because no sinner can run away from God's mercy because God's a pursuing God. And if God is so inclined to save that individual, he will draw that person to himself. But also, if that person persists in their rebellion, God will also bring glory to himself in bringing judgment and justice to the one who rebels against him. No sin and no sinner can thwart God's kingdom plans. But the good news is because of Jesus Christ, if you don't know Jesus, by faith in him, you can be a part of God's kingdom plans. So, take solace then in 3 thoughts regarding God's sovereignty. I'll give you them and then we'll break them down. Number 1, enemies are stuck sovereignly fulfilling God's will. I love that one. They think they walk in all this freedom. I'm telling you what, right now, the enemies of God are stuck doing whatever God's will is. That's hope today. Number 2, everything is encompassed in God's sovereignty. Everything. Even when you don't see it, even when it seems so natural, run of play in your life. And number 3, encouragement results when sovereignty is seen. When you see God coming through on his promises that no purpose of his can be thwarted. When you see God coming through and building his kingdom. Like last week, how many needed last week's baptism? Isn't it just like I need that all the time. Like, I just need to see that God's still saving people. Anyone else in the house yesterday? Like, I need it. I know we're coming for them, but I'll be honest, I'm coming for me. Like, I just need to know that dead people are still coming to life in Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Give me more of that.